Let's go to Acts chapter 6. We're going to be looking at the latter part of chapter 6 and then all of chapter 7. Charlie, would you start us with a word of prayer? And would you please pray that we will, in proclaiming the gospel, be as bold as Stephen?
Enjoy your children. We'll thank the church that meets here, that worships you in spirit and truth. Thank you for the congregation, and many members we have here that work to spread your word. Lord, we ask you to give us courage and strength to be like Stephen as he proclaimed the gospel. Hopefully we'll be able to do it with freedom and without harm. We ask you, Lord, that be with the sick of our number, the ones that lost loved ones, and bless them and comfort them as only you can. We all these things in Christ's name.
Amen. Did you get wet?
A little bit.
Oh, a little bit. Ben is so awesome. See, he went and got my glasses for me. Okay, so tonight we're going to be looking at the speech of Stephen, or the sermon of Stephen. We'll open up the floor for questions and comments and observations in just a moment. But so the course I'd like to take is, first I would like for us to look at why this is important. Then I would like to just open the floor. What did you see? What stood out to you? Then we'll do that for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so. And then I want to come back around and I want to make sure that we have an understanding of exactly what Stephen is talking about. Because, as I'll point out here in just a few minutes, this is one of the most important speeches or sermons. I think I will say speech mostly through this, in the book of Acts. And so we need to understand what he is saying. And along that way, I think I want to answer about 5 of these 10 questions. And so that's what I'd like for us to do this evening. This is perhaps the most important speech in the entire book of Acts, if for this one reason: it's the longest. Of all the sermons and all the speeches in the book of Acts, this one is the longest. We have the most detail about it. Perhaps the most important story that's repeatedly told in the book of Acts is the conversion of Paul. In fact, it's going to be told 3 times. So yes, that is really important. But of all the sermons and speeches, I think we should see this one as the most important because it is the longest that is recorded for us. I think another reason that we need to pay close attention to what's being said here is because what Stephen will be doing, he is going to be refuting them, the leadership, on one level. But on another level, for us as readers, whether it's that first century group or to Theophilus or to us today, we're getting it's a polemic is what we're getting. We're getting a basis for how to make an argument against Judaism as a way of salvation, against the temple, which don't mean so much to us per se, but it would have meant a lot to them, to those first readers. How do you make that argument against Judaism and temple worship versus this newfangled thing called Christianity? And so on a lot of different levels, this is a really important component in the story that is being told to us in Acts, and how it would have served and worked for the early Christians as they are trying to understand the Christians' relationship to Judaism, Jews' relationship to Judaism and Christianity, and then Gentiles wrapped all up into that. So there's a lot here. So I want to make sure that we get through it tonight. Now, last week you had a whole lot of comments. Everybody had a lot of comments about Stephen. I hope you still have some left. You got 10 minutes. Go. Yes, Bradley. Did you like Stephen? Okay, Bradley likes Stephen. I think, can we all be in agreement of that? All right. No, questions, comments, observations? Yes, Carolyn.
It was interesting that his face was like the face of an angel.
Okay, so at the beginning, let's see, is that verse 15? Yeah, verse 15 of chapter 6. And we'll get into the details on this in just a moment, but just whatever you want to talk about. So they're gazing at him, all who sat in the council. They saw that his face was like the face of an angel. I think that that's more than he's good looking. I think his face is probably glowing brightly. Why do you think that is? Did you have a thought on why that would have been like that? Or was that the question?
Well, my thought was that it showed that he was a messenger from God.
Okay, I like that. There's the idea then that, okay, his face is glowing like this. Something really significant is here. For Luke to say it like that of an angel, because here's something that we got to keep in mind, particularly when we're looking at this section. Stephen's words have an effect on those people he was talking to. But we have some details that perhaps they don't. And I don't know if they looked at him and said, oh, wow, he is so angelic looking. He must be a divine messenger. Let's kill him. But doesn't that fit in with what what he's going to accuse them of? You have always killed the messengers of God. The word angel and the word messenger are the same word. In the Greek, at least. So, for us as the reader looking at the scene, yeah, the fact that his face turns white is really important. I need to go over here first, Tim, then I'll come to you.
It made me think of Moses' face glowing. And he, his face is glowing, and then he talks about Moses. So
Right.
if it was in the telling of what they knew, then they could have made that connection.
Yeah, that's right. So the direct relationship to Moses' face turning white, and then we're going to have this long talk about Moses. And what's one of the accusations that's been leveled against Stephen in relationship to Moses? He's teaching things contrary to the customs and the law of Moses, and then he becomes white, and there you go. Tim.
I was just going to say, it could be miraculous,
Yeah.
or something like that, but also, I know that there's certain times, if you get embarrassed and blushed,
Okay.
when you, there's just certain things that happen to you that your body and physiology, your blood flows a certain way. A lot of people walk around, a young lady that's pregnant, you have a glow about you. So, could be some natural.
I hadn't.
Over him, at the end of that, he had this peace that passes all understanding, if you will, come over him that I get it, and I hope I've explained it to them.
I like the glow. He's got the glow of the gospel, and that peace as he's going through this. Bobby?
If I were directing a movie,
Yeah.
and this scene was happening, this is about something that it's going to be very important, so they're highlighting exactly what they want. All direction is on his face, and he's about to say something important.
So this is highlighting that we've got to listen to him.
Yeah, and especially after he was just accused.
Right.
So it's like God had his spotlight set here.
On him. I like that. Let me give you one thing to think about here, and maybe we can do one. Let me say this one thing, and then we'll. I got to go to Billy, and then I'll come to Kathy. I missed somebody or else, but yes. Hang on. We'll go here, then here, then here. All right. This is the third time a Christian has been before the religious leaders. So Peter and John in chapter 4. They come with evidence. What is the evidence of their power? The lame man standing beside them. In chapter 5, the apostles are arrested. What's the evidence that is presented that they are some miraculous workers and teachers of truth? What happens to them when they're in jail? Yeah, they're saved. and the doors aren't open. The guards are still there. So that's their witness. All right, then I would then, with those two things in mind, think about this angelic face. This is the evidence. You need to listen to him. And again, they are going to not listen to the evidence when we get to the story. Okay, here, and here.
Yeah, they had denied obvious miracles, so it wouldn't be shocking if they deny a glowing face that looks divine.
That's right. They've been, and I'm going to try my best to repeat everything because I've already had a few people say they can't hear. They've been denying the miracles, so we shouldn't be surprised that they're going to deny this miracle or this calmness and peace that is being radiated before he speaks. Billy?
Verse 8, it said he was full of faith and power, which had to be from God. So I think that's how they raised when Moses did all about it. His face glowed from this thing.
Right. Billy took us to verse 8 of chapter 6, and it says, and Stephen was full of grace and power, and he was doing great wonders and signs among the people. If I'm not mistaken, so far, the only people who have done that kind of stuff are the apostles. And so Stephen, at least in a narrative form, is elevated here because he's doing apostolic signs and wonders. If you go back to verse 3, they were supposed to choose 7 men of good repute, full of spirit and wisdom. They were going to be appointed for the duty of the distribution to the needy widows. So we see that there. If you look at chapter 7 and verse 10, speaking of Joseph, God rescued him out of all of his afflictions and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh. So you see that grace and favor and grace and wisdom kind of linked all the way through with Stephen and as part of his speech. Kathy?
In Ecclesiastes 8:1 it says, "Who is like the wise man and who knows the interpretation of a matter? A wise man illumines him, a man's wisdom illumines him and causes his stern face to beam."
Yes.
So
Ecclesiastes chapter 8:1 speaks of how wisdom illuminates the face of the wise man. And so we certainly see that here. Who brought up the face, Carolyn? That was good. I like that discussion. I think that's really important. All right, give me, we got time for just a couple more. Andy?
First of all, I want to disagree with Tim. I don't think that Stephen was pregnant.
Oh.
But one thing I
Pregnant
noticed,
pause, hang on. Okay, go ahead.
I noticed that Stephen was kind of answering the argument about Moses, and Jesus was disagreeing with Moses. He makes the argument that Moses was rejected by the Israelites. And he kind of focuses on how they were rejecting all of the big names.
Yes.
And now they're wanting to, attack Jesus because they think he's not following after these guys that they weren't following originally.
Right. Yes, rejection is going to be a big part of what he's going to lay out from it constantly. It doesn't matter who it is. Abraham's the only one, I think, in this who's not rejected. This entire speech. But it's rejection over and over and over again. It's no wonder then that you're rejecting your Lord and Savior Jesus.
They look on him, they see his face, and sit there intent on every word he's about to say. And he's got him sucked in. He is sitting there talking to him about Moses, building the whole argument, building the whole thing. And then I can't imagine what their eyes did or what their faces did, because they're kind of entranced.
Right.
You think about it, if that's what they got, they're going, this look of awe, and look at this guy. What is he saying? And then he's like, "You stiff-necked and uncircumcised of heart and ear." You know that coming out of his face, coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
They got incensed.
Hey, how mad do you have to be to kill somebody just like that? I mean, that's something else. So oh yeah, I mean, just laid in on them and they immediately thrust him out and start picking up stones and stone him. Okay, give me one more. Anybody got one more? Yeah, Ben.
Interesting, you can see sort of where their priorities lie, but then why he goes the route that he does based on what they tried to get people to lie about him about. Because, it says they secretly induced men to say, we have heard him speak blasphemous words. So, against Moses, and at last time I checked, you can't blaspheme Moses, and against God, but then they talked about how he incessantly speaks against this holy place and the law, and how Jesus is going to alter or destroy the customs that Moses brought forth. So I think that's part of why he makes such a strong point about Moses, because that's part of what they were trying to basically accuse him of. And he's showing them that, you claim to follow Moses in the law, but in fact, your fathers rejected him just like you're rejecting Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
He said he didn't know if you could blaspheme Moses. Well, not really, but to them and their being so much sticklers for the law, to them that was blasphemy.
So then to speak against the law, even to say you don't have to do this anymore, I think in their eyes would be, and Shelley always says I mispronounce this word, so she's not here tonight. Hey, would y'all please keep Anna in your prayers? She took her to the doctor tonight. She has had vomiting and diarrhea now since Monday night at about 11 o'clock, and it's just nonstop. So I would appreciate that. But anyway, she always says I mispronounce blaspheme. See, I just did it. Y'all don't even know it. So anyway, yes, you can blaspheme Moses by saying Moses' law doesn't matter anymore. All right. Okay, let's turn to question 1 on page 23. Ben gave us a good transition there. Let's begin the reading with verse 8 of chapter 6. I want us to look at the circumstances surrounding Stephen's arrest. And Stephen, full of grace and power, was doing great wonders and signs among the people. So he's the first one, other than the apostles, who's recorded doing such things. Look at verse 9. Some of those who belonged to the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called. Why do you think Luke would put that parenthetical in there? They belonged to the synagogue of the freedmen, as they called it. Well, all right, they weren't freedmen in the sense of what, Don? Spiritually. Well, okay, there we go. It's all about spiritual freedom. They're slaves to the law. They call themselves freedmen, but they really weren't, because they're following the law. Let's see, pick up where's my spot there? Verse 9. They belonged to the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called, and of the Cyrenians and the Alexandrians and those from Cilicia and Asia, rose up and disputed with Stephen. Now, in the class that Drew and I taught, I think I pointed out that basically you've got 4 or 5 different ethnicities there, and they're probably got 5 different synagogues or wrapped up around. That may be the case. I did read something last week that said that's probably not the case. It's probably one synagogue, and these 5 different groups are coming together within that synagogue. Whichever way you want to take it. Here are some Jewish people who are arguing with Stephen. Now, one of the groups that's mentioned here is Cilicia. Who's an important person within this context, within this story, who is from Cilicia? So, Paul. So whose feet are they going to lay their coats at the end? Paul, or Saul as he is known at this time, and he is from Cilicia. So I think perhaps one of the ways we could read this is he's arguing here at the beginning with Stephen as part of this group, and they cannot, verse 10, they could not withstand the wisdom and the spirit with which he was speaking. So, I'm going to insert a big so there. So, notice the 3 things that they do. They secretly instigated men who said, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God." So that's the first thing. They stirred up men to say they've heard him say. Second thing they do is verse 12. They stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes, and they called upon them and seized him and brought him before the council. What's significant about verse 12 that we have not seen thus far in our reading of Acts? Who's angry at Christians? The regular people. That's right. Boy, that is not the way we normally see it. When it came to the crucifixion of Jesus, who agitated the regular people? The leaders did. But when it comes to Stephen, we've got it just the opposite. It's the regular people who are agitating the already agitated leaders, and they seize Stephen. So this is the third time now a Christian has been seized and brought before the council. Verse 13, the third thing they did was they set up false witnesses who said, "This man never ceases to speak words against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moses delivered to us." All right, so there's three things that they do. And this is question one. Three circumstances surrounding Stephen's arrest. They secretly instigated men to accuse him of blasphemy, that's like the big sin that you could commit short of idolatry. The second thing they do is they stir up the people, who stir up the leaders and the scribes to arrest him. And then third, they set up false witnesses to accuse Stephen. But what are they accusing Stephen? And again, that's one of the big 10. Don't bear false witness. So they're committing a lot of bad here. But what is it that Stephen said, from what they accused Stephen of saying, what part of that's not true? That could be their interpretation, but yeah, I'll say that. Short of them using that interpretive word, has Stephen said anything, if he said this at all, that wasn't true? Did you still have to keep the law of Moses in order to be saved? No. Had Jesus already talked about destruction coming upon the temple? Yeah. So even in what they're accusing him of saying are things he could have said. And at the very least are things Jesus said. And at the very least are things that are going to be said as we progress through the story of Acts anyway. So they've set Stephen up to answer what in their minds are some pretty big questions. But in the minds of us as the readers of Acts, it's like, what's new? Jesus has been saying this stuff since Luke. So nothing's really new. But they set him up against these accusations. Question 2 there, we've already kind of covered Stephen's face, so we'll skip over that. Question 3, and this is where I want to spend a few minutes here just kind of weaving through this entire sermon. Stephen's not actually going to directly address the accusations. So if somebody had arrested you and brought you before the authorities and they said, "Thanks for setting up front, Don," and they have said, "Don here has said that Jesus of Nazareth is going to come back one day and he's going to destroy the earth," you might say something like, "That's true and all, but I didn't say it that meanly." I think Stephen could have started out and said, "Hey, all that stuff's true, but I wasn't that rude about it. Come on, I'm just telling you what Jesus already said, about 2 months ago. And he did a whole lot worse when he showed up and talked about it. He's overturning tables and all that stuff." Instead of addressing the accusations and the things that they're saying, he's going to take a course of action that gets actually to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is twofold. God has communicated to us, or the patriarchs, if you want to do it that way, to us as a people, outside of the temple. So don't limit God to this temple. And the second thing he's going to communicate is, whether you had the tabernacle or whether you had the temple, whether you had the law of Moses or not, you or we as a people have always rejected God's messengers. And that's the twofold approach that He's going to take all the way through it. Let me give you a little bit of an outline that that you can kind of follow here. I've got, I found 2 or 3, and I had an outline that I was working off of when I was writing this book, and then I came across another one earlier this week that I liked as well. Let me just look at my notes here real quick. Okay, let's start. I want to read some of this. So let's start reading at verse 1. We'll start at verse 15 of chapter 6. And gazing at him, and all who sat in the council saw that his face was like the face of an angel. And the high priest said, "Are these things so?" And Stephen said, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was where? Mesopotamia. That, not in Israel, not in Jerusalem, not even in the land of promise, but in the land of the Gentiles. Before he even lived in Haran. And he said to him, 'Get out from your land and from your kindred and go to the land that I will show you.' So then Abraham went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into the land in which you're now living. Yet he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot's length, but promised to give it to him as a possession and to his offspring after him, though he had no children. And God spoke to this effect, that his offspring would be sojourners in a land belonging to others, who would enslave them and afflict them for 400 years. But I will judge the nation that they serve, said God, and after that they shall come out and worship me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham became the father of Isaac, circumcised him on the 8th day. Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob the 12 patriarchs. All right, let me stop at verse 8. So what do you see about what he is saying about Abraham? Okay, so circumcision is before the law. What was Abraham before he was circumcised? I know this is a weird question, but I think, he was a Gentile. What's going to happen, I know as we're reading it, but what's going to happen in just 3 chapters? Yeah, Cornelius. The gospel is going to be preached to Gentiles. And what's going to be the big argument? They got to be circumcised in order to be saved. And yet God talked to our Father, the originator of our people, and communicated to him and appeared to him. I think that phrase in verse 2 is very important. The God of what? Glory appeared to Abraham. In their mind, in their sense, and even in the sense that we read in the Old Testament, where does the glory of God reside? In the temple or the tabernacle, depending on which age you're in. And yet he is saying, no, actually it was the glory, not through a temple or tabernacle. He appeared to him when he was a Gentile in a Gentile land. That's a really important point to make. Because as we're reading this, as people past that, how can we begin to formulate an argument with our Jewish neighbor, or that you don't have to force Gentiles to keep the law of Moses, or with a Gentile, you don't have to keep the law of Moses in order to be saved. Just look at Abraham. God's glory is appearing to him when he was a Gentile in a Gentile land. He's making this argument all the way through. All right, look at verse 9. You're going to now we're going to introduce the rejection motif. Look at verse 9. And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt. All right. So what did they do with what did the patriarchs do to Joseph? They rejected him. So they sold him. And they sold him where? Down to Egypt. Where's the place we're never supposed to go? Egypt. And guess who is there in the place we're never supposed to go with the one that has been rejected by the patriarchs? What's the end of verse 9? And God was with him. Did he have a tabernacle? Did he have a temple? No. But God's still there. That's right. Look at verse 10. And God rescued him out of all of his afflictions, and he gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who made him ruler over Egypt and over all of his household. Now there came a famine throughout all of Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers on their first visit. On the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. Joseph sent and summoned Jacob, his father, and all of his kindred, 75 persons in all. Jacob went down into Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers, and they were carried back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Haran and Shechem. But as the time of the promise drew near, which God had granted to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied where? In Egypt. Until there arose over Egypt another king who did not know Joseph. He dealt shrewdly with our race and forced our fathers to expose their infants so that they would not be kept alive. And at this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight. And he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. And when he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him, brought him up as her own son. Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He was mighty in words and deeds. But when he was 40 years old, he came to his heart to visit his brothers and the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wrong, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptians. He supposed that his brothers would understand that God was giving them salvation by his hand. But what? But they didn't understand, so they did what? They rejected Moses. So on the following day, he appeared to them, and they were quarreling. He tried to reconcile them, saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you do wrong?" But the man who was wronging his neighbor thrust Moses aside, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" And at this retort, Moses fled because he's rejected, became an exile in the land of Midian, where he had become the father of 2 sons. Now when 40 years had passed, who appears to Moses? An angel, a messenger of God, not in the temple, not in the tabernacle, not in Jerusalem, not in Judea, not in the promised land, but in the land of the Gentiles. So no matter where God's people are, God's there. That's right. And he's telling something. It's not about this place, fellas. Because he's going to say in later down in verse 48, "Yet the Most High God does not dwell in houses that are made by hands." So God's not limited to this place, and he's not limited just to our people, the originator of our people. He was a Gentile before he was a Jew. All right, and then there's that motif of rejection. Verse 31, "When Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight, and he drew near and looked. And there came the voice of the Lord, I am the Lord, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob." And Moses trembled and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for this place where you are standing is holy ground. I have surely seen the afflictions of my people who are," where? Egypt. So again, we have the motif here, the idea that God's not limited. I keep pointing back here. The temple's back here, okay? He's not limited to this temple, guys. He can see and be everywhere. Where did I end off at? 34. "And I have heard their groanings, and I have come down to deliver them. And now I will send you to Egypt." And then this Moses whom they rejected. So we get that again, just point blank. "Who made you a ruler and a judge?" This man God sent as both a ruler and the redeemer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. This man led them out, performing wonders and signs in Egypt, at the Red Sea, and in the wilderness for 40 years. Who else has been performing wonders and signs? Most recently within the book of Acts, the apostles, Stephen. Go back just 2 months later-ish, 3, and who's performing wonders and signs in front of all the people? It's Jesus. Verse 37, this is the Moses who said to the Israelites, God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. This is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness when the angel who spoke to him at Mount Sinai with our fathers, he received living oracles to give us. So he's saying, look, one day, Moses said one day a prophet is going to rise up from among you. God's going to raise him up. I think we pointed this out a few weeks ago, that raise up verbiage is not necessarily meaning that God's going to inspire a new man to be a prophet. But in the case of Jesus, what does it mean? Yeah, resurrection. He proved that this is the guy we listen to by literally raising him up. Our fathers, verse 39, but our fathers refused to obey him. But he thrust him aside, and in their hearts they turned again to where? Egypt, place we don't go. And they said to Aaron, make for us gods who will go before us, and for this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days and offered a sacrifice to the idols and were rejoicing in the works of their hands. I've got that underlined because it ties into verse 48. But God turned away and gave them over to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. Did you bring to me slain beasts and sacrifices during the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You took up the tent of Molech, the star of your god Rephan, the images that you made to worship, and I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. Our fathers had the tent of witness in the wilderness, just as he who spoke to Moses directed him to make it according to the pattern he had seen. So they're saying, why are you exalting this temple? Remember, our forefathers had the tabernacle that Moses made to the exact image that God told him, and yet they still did what? They still rejected him in the wilderness. Our fathers, verse 45, in turn brought it with Joshua when they dispossessed the nations that God drove out before our fathers. So it was until the days of David. And what did the people basically do in the days of Joshua and the judges? That's right, whatever they wanted. Whatever they wanted. They still rejected God, despite the fact they had God's presence before them. Verse 46, David found favor in the sight of God, asked to build him a dwelling place for the God of Jacob, but it was Solomon who built a house for him. Yet, the Most High does not dwell in houses made by hands, as the prophet says, heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest? Did not my hands make all these things? So what he's been doing is, he's been saying to them, God works outside of this temple, guys. God works outside the law of Moses. Because he appears to all these people who we exalt as being godly men. He appears to them outside of this place. Abraham in Mesopotamia. Joseph in Egypt. Moses in the land of Midian. God appeared. I think one of the parts of this that he is setting up is what's going to be coming a little bit later as we're readers of Acts and beyond this in a historical setting is God's about to appear to a people who are outside of the Jewish nation. And we got to be okay with that because that's how God's been working this whole time. And then the second level he is saying, and God's people have always been rejected. The only one in this whole scenario who's not rejected is Abraham and Aaron. Nobody rejects Abraham. And the people didn't reject Aaron. In fact, they turned to Aaron for him to make them an idol. But I want you to notice the connection between verse 41 and verse 48. What did they make in verse 41 with their hands? An idol. What did they make in verse 48 with their hands? Temple. What had they turned the temple into? They had turned it into an idol. They had turned it into an idol. In fact, in the days of Jeremiah, when the Babylonians are coming, the cry is, but the temple, the temple, the temple. We've got the temple. It'll save us. Don't worry. God will never destroy the place of the dwelling of His glory. Oh yeah, did the same thing with the ark. That's right. They put their faith in a box. They put their faith in a box. And instead of the God who was behind the box. And so he's leveling these charges. You have always rejected God's people, so it shouldn't be any wonder you're rejecting Jesus and God and His people today. God has always been working outside this temple. He's always been working outside this law, and He's going to keep working outside this law. And so then he comes to that punchline here, maybe quite literally, that Mike pointed out. You stiff-necked people, verse 51, uncircumcised in heart and ears, you always resist the Holy Spirit. As your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who announced beforehand the coming of the righteous one, whom you have now betrayed and murdered. You have received the law as delivered by angels and did not keep it. You want to talk about me blaspheming Moses? What are you doing? You're not keeping it either. Because you're rejecting God's people over and over and over again. And the law and the prophets and the Psalms and Moses himself said, God is going to raise up a prophet like me. Listen to him. I want to insert something here. Go back to chapter 4. Let me find. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's chapter 3. That's why I couldn't find it. It's chapter 3. Now, Peter is going to say basically the same thing about Moses, about the replacement for Moses being raised up at verse 22. I just want you to listen to this. And Moses said, the Lord God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers who shall listen to him, and you shall listen to him in whatever he tells you. And it shall be that every soul who does not listen to that prophet shall be destroyed from the people. Something that we need to keep in mind here as we're looking at this sermon of Stephen's, what's one of the accusations that they leveled against him? They say a Jesus of Nazareth is going to come and destroy this place. One of the arguments that Stephen is making here in this sermon, without having to come right out and saying it, is yes, he is. Because you have refused to listen to him. All along, you have been rejecting and rejecting and rejecting. In fact, the last time we had a temple, you rejected him and it got destroyed. And that's what's going to happen this time as well. Well, ultimately, they're really mad at Jesus. But, hey, they're going to take it out on Stephen. So, just real quick, now when they had heard these things, they were enraged. They ground their teeth at them. full of the Holy Spirit, he gazed up to heaven, saw the glory of God, Jesus standing at his right hand. He said, "Behold, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man at the right hand of God." But they cried out with a loud voice and stopped their ears and rushed together at him. They cast him out of the city and they stoned him. They laid their garments at the feet of a young man named Stephen. As he was being stoned, Stephen called out, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." Falling to his knees, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." And when he had said this, he fell asleep. Who is that reminiscent of? Yeah, it's reminiscent of Christ. So we got some things that are the people incite the leaders who then kill him, where in Jesus it's the leaders inciting the people.
Thing is that where he says stiff-necked right there,
Yeah.
that is actually what, when God is talking to Moses right after the golden calf incident, he calls them an obstinate people.
Yes.
The literal translation there is stiff-necked.
Ah.
So that, I think he's actually using that for purpose.
Right.
Because it goes right back to the golden calf and the rejection of God, right? And
Right.
Moses.
And so we read that whole sermon. Why don't you think for a minute? That's the longest sermon in this book. I think it's probably the most important sermon in the book because it really gets to the heart of why they were rejecting Jesus and Christianity and what they needed to know about God's work, because it is about to break open like they had never imagined it before, because now Gentiles are going to start coming into the family of Christ, and people, at least Jewish-leaning Christians, going to have a real hard issue with that, and they've got to get over it. And part of Stephen's speech does that. One last thing, I want to end with this. I think the most remarkable thing about Stephen here, and this is what I need to learn, I think it's what we all need to learn, is that they make false accusations against him, but he never answers their false accusations. What he did was he cut through all that and just got right to the heart of the matter. And the next time somebody approaches you and they're ready to have a fight or they're ready to have an argument, and it's one of those times where you know what, maybe we need to have this discussion, just get to the heart of the matter and what's behind it. Because if we start trying to defend ourselves against false accusations, it ain't going to go nowhere. Just get to the heart of the matter. And I like that about Stephen. Okay, next week, Lord willing, we'll be starting lesson 9. We're going to look at the work of Stephen. It's going to go from, it's all of chapter 8, it looks like. Yeah, all of chapter 8. So next week, thank y'all very much.